All right, so looks like we can get started. Just first off, I would like to introduce our speaker, Aman. I'd like to thank him a lot for being here today on behalf of DraftBit, and uh, we we like explore how it would be possible without their support. So with that said, please welcome Aman.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Leo. It's a pleasure to be here. Uh, hello, everyone. I'm Aman Mittal. I'm currently working as a developer advocate at DraftBit. Uh, let's dive in. I'll introduce what DraftBit is, and maybe we can get some hands-on experience seeing how to create mobile applications or UIs inside DraftBit. I'll just share my screen. Um, I hope you all can see my screen. If there's any problem, please let me know. So, yeah, Dropbit is basically, here we go. So, this is like, I've already introduced myself. So, yeah, let's get on with Dropbit. Dropbit is basically a no-code, low-code platform to build mobile applications. It's an end-to-end mobile builder which works inside your browser. You don't have to know code. Uh, but if you know, like you can build more advanced functionalities that Traffic currently doesn't support. And uh, yeah, it's in a nutshell, it's basically a visual tool. The core functionality of Traffic is based on React Native and Expo. React Native is a framework by Facebook. It's an open source framework to build native mobile applications that works both on iOS and Android. Uh, Currently, now React Native also supports things like TV and watches, smartwatches. But yeah, Darkbit is oriented only on the mobile framework, mobile platform. Expo is another framework that is, I won't call it a framework, it's more of a utility tool that helps you build universal applications. So with Expo, you can basically convert your mobile application also for web. Uh, so uh, to help you build for multiple platforms, not only for like iOS and Android, but also for like publishing PWAs or like progressive web apps. Some of the core features that Rapid currently includes is that it's fast and focused development. It's basically oriented towards these two things. So, like, if you guys have like experience building mobile applications, like I've been working as a React Native developer for past like 2 years, 2.5 years. So, one thing that takes a lot of time is like building the structure, building the UIs inside the app. Generally, like core functionalities of the mobile application, like integrating data and all that stuff is not so time consuming, but building UIs from scratch is very time consuming effort. And imagine like working in a team and having a design system and trying to implement that by writing code. It takes a lot of effort and time. So GraphBit tries to help you with that area. It gives you a better experience inside your web browser, and it helps you basically overcome those kind of constraints, and you can build UIs quite fast, quite easily, and see what's going on when you are trying to build that UI interface. For example, React Native requires you to have either real-time devices or simulators installed on your local development environment. GraphBit doesn't. GraphBit works, as I said, it works inside a web browser. It gives you an interface. We'll see how that works in a moment. So I've already mentioned that like it also helps you build apps for iOS, Android, and progressive web apps. So you just it's so basically the philosophy behind React Native is that you write code once and you publish for these multiple platforms. So you don't have to write specific code for iOS or Android or web. In BW's case, uh, GraphBit also gives you access to the source code. So it generates the source code behind each user interface or each application you're trying to build. It doesn't constrain you. It gives you full source code that you can easily download from GraphBit, and you can just by like running some commands that React Native offers in the documentation, you can easily get started. So it's not just like if you're building a user interface, it will just give you that kind of code. It will give you the complete React Native project. GraphBit allows you to bring your own data. So if you have like a REST API endpoints from like hosted somewhere on a server, or uh, if you have like Firebase data, like Firebase file store data, GraphBit also has integration for Firebase. Currently, it's an MVP. It's a beta feature, so it's not available for everyone. But like if you are interested, you can join the beta and help us uh, overcome those solutions, or like overcome those problems that you face while building with Firebase inside GraphBit, so we can help you more and integrate more features. Some more features about GraphBit is that currently it supports low-code authentication. So what I mean by that is that, uh, for example, GraphBit has complete support for Zeno. It's a backend list service and some other backend list service like Zeno. So you don't have to write authentication from scratch. You just have your endpoints integrated inside GraphBit, and then you can control how the flow would work. Like from going from a login screen to a home page, what kind of variables or constraints you might have, you can easily easily write that. So GraphBit offers you a feature called custom functions that with that help of those custom functions, you can implement a low-code authentication. GraphBit also supports a custom color palette, so you can like it comes with a default uh, design system of colors, so you can include your own colors. It also has modern typography, fonts, icons, collections that you would probably use in a mobile app, especially like using React Native or Expo. And we also support like some example screens, so like you can like copy that into inside your project and then like rebuild on top of it, or like use some components out of it and delete the rest of the components. And the last feature that has is that you can have multiple collaborators in one workspace. So like if you're building an app as a team, you don't have to like have the copy of the application spread across different accounts. You can have like multiple accounts accessing that one particular application. Uh, so before diving in, let's learn how GraphBit looks like. So basically, when you create an app inside GraphBit, which we'll go through that process just after this slide, you get this interface. This interface basically has some little terminology that might help you get familiar with GraphBit as a platform. So this is like the navigation panel, the main navigation panel, where you can find the builder-wide controls. Inside the builder-wide controls, you will find things like app level settings or project level settings, add your own assets. This is how you integrate your data from an API. You can set your own navigators inside GraphBit. Like if you want to create a particular set of screens inside a tab navigator, so you will probably go into this tab and build that. The theme is basically how the color palette is available. You can set your own custom colors and create your own design system around it. And This is a screen, which is the main tab, the initial tab, where you will find this interface. It shows a list of screens, the current screens that are available inside your GraphQuick app. You can add more screens by clicking this button. You can delete some screens and you can check out the history, that what previous screens you had inside your app if you want to bring something back. Layout tree works similar to what how screens are. It's basically shows a representation of all the components inside a screen. So for example, this screen has a background image, an image which is like called logo here, a title which is a text component, another like tagline or subtitle is it's another text component. So the ideology behind these components is that they are more related to how you would define or write inside code when creating either iOS apps or React Native apps or Android apps. So for example, view is basically an empty container. It's just like how a div element is on HTML, if you guys are familiar. So that's how like closely GraphQuick components represent React Native components. This is what we call canvas. Canvas is basically when you're building the app UI interface of the screen. You visually see what kind of elements you are placing and what are their positions inside the screen. And it has three modes. So this is called the single screen mode. This is called the multiple screen mode. Inside the single screen mode, you'll see the visual representation of all the user interface components. Multiple screen modes would just place the screens in a column manner. And this is a web preview, like you can actually see how your screen would look inside an app. And then you can like interact with components. So for example, if this button navigates to another screen, you can do that inside web preview. GraphQuick also offers like a functionality to use this particular app when it's in development mode using Expo app. You scan the QR code and you go into a live preview mode. This button, the preview button, does that for you. And the last element of this, the biggest element, is that properties panel. Properties panel actually it composes of like 4 different tabs. This is like the style tab. So style tab is like how you would style a component. So for example, this layout panel is available for the whole screen, like the welcome screen. We'll get into these kind of details when we get some hands-on experience. So let's get some hands-on experience, because it would be better to view that. So once you log in inside your GraphQuick account, sorry about that. So once you log in inside your GraphQuick account, you will be welcomed by this dashboard interface. The dashboard interface contains all of your applications, plus it also shows like what kind of collaborators you have inside your app. So for example, one of my colleagues is a collaborator and he can view anytime which application I'm working on. This is a settings button that brings to your workspace settings. Let's build some interface. So what I'm trying to build here is that we're going to implement this welcome screen and see how GraphQuick actually works with these kind of components. We'll build this from scratch. It just basically contains an image and 2 buttons and some text. To create a new application in GraphQuick, you click this button called Create App. You name your app. You can give it a description or leave it blank. You click Continue. You can also start with some available screens or some available patterns of screens inside GraphQuick. or you can start with a blank app to build from scratch. Once it has done some initialization behind the scenes, you can click on this button and it will open the builder interface. In the builder interface, you are welcomed by a blank screen, which doesn't represent any components on the screen. So yeah, let's start building it. So why don't we first start with adding the image background I have already locally stored in my laptop. So you click on the assets button. Here you can add your own image assets you want to use inside your application. I'll just click it and add this image I've already prepared. Once it's uploaded, it will show here, it will show the format. There are only like 4 kind of image formats supported right now. You click the done button, the model closes, the image is available. So yeah, if you want to rename a screen, which you would inside your application when you're trying to build, you can like double click it, type the name, press enter, and the name would be reflected everywhere. Now this screen would be referenced by this name instead of blank. Uh, this is how you access your project settings, where you can upload an app icon, a splash icon that initially shows when an application loads. You can set your theme color or background color. There are some other settings related to the splash screen. You can upload them as we just did with the assets. There are some advanced settings available, like for which platform you want to dedicate this app to. Like for example, the all platform is for like cross-platform for both iOS and Android. The orientation, the default orientation of the app is the default is portrait, but yeah, you can choose or fix one of these settings. The PW theme color. These are some advanced settings that you would need when you're publishing the app. So like Draftbit doesn't constrains you just by building the app. It helps, it wants you to basically publish app in the app store. So currently it supports Apple App Store, Google Play Store. And if you want to test your app out, you can also like publish the app to test flight mode for iOS, to just share it with your team members or other people whom you want to get review. Uh, we have also concept of global variables. So like if you want to store some data inside your app on some user interaction, you can clearly create some key and the value can be uh, defined when the user interaction is happening. So let's build a first component. So like to add a new component, you click on this plus button next to the layout. There are different sets of components available, categorized under different categories. So example for basic contains these 4 components. Generally, these are containers or some basic elements, like for example, text or an icon or a star rating. There are also like different buttons available that you might like to use. So for example, button solid has a solid background and button outline has a different kind of outlook, but both have like same functionalities behind it. Uh, there are some media components that you might want to include, for example, image and image background. We want image background to add and show that background image inside our app as the whole screen, that it covers the whole screen. I'm going to delete these 2 components. So yeah, like to delete this, you just click on this menu item and you can delete it. Also, like when you have deleted a component, even if by mistake or you want to bring it back, you can always view the deleted components and you can always like click this button to bring them back to the screen. So this image background component currently has a default image. To change its image, we go to the properties panel. The properties panel, as we learned before, has 4 tabs. So this is a styling tab. So we want to add its source, so we have to change its data. There's also like config tab where you can play around and configure the specific component. So for example, the image background has a name, that a component name, a resize mode, and a backspace visibility. These configurations under context tab are different for each and every component. So for example, a text component would not have these two properties. Uh, the data tab allows you to add or integrate the source of your data. So for example, currently the source type of this background image is remote, and a URL coming from somewhere, and a source is like this, that I have entered manually this URL. But like I want to add this, replace this image with an asset we just uploaded. So what I'll do is I'll select static, and I'll then select the source of the image from the assets, and then I select the image, and it will be shown inside, on your screen. Uh, let's add some text to this. So what I'll do is that I want to add a welcome text and a tagline. So I'll create a use a view component to create a container beneath or like on this image background. So the image background is like in the background of the screen, and all of the components that we are going to add to the screen are going to be added uh, on this image background. So like you can see this tree layout happening here, and you can like also toggle if you have like multiple components. Uh, in the single screen mode, you cannot interact with components, but you can definitely see their outline. So for example, the view component currently doesn't have anything inside it. It's just an empty box. What I'll do is I'll position it somewhere here in the center or like the upper center. To position it here, I'll have to change its style configurations. I'll go to the properties panel. I'll click on the styles tab. uh, I want to add it some margin. So like the styles tab is also like configuration. It has different configuration that is available on a specific component. But most of these style configuration or layout configurations are similar. So for example, background color you would find on most of the components, or like the flex arrangement of the components you would find on most of the components. So basically, React Native uses Flexbox, which is like a CSS layout, uh, and .NET also uses Flex as the default CSS layout, or like the only available layout pattern. So yeah, let's add some margin. Like and like to set this up, I'll just press the enter, and it just came down a bit. So like now the view component is positioned uh, 30 points from the top, and like you can also set like padding if you want. I'll set it a top padding of 20, a bottom padding of 20. You can also set like so by default every component inside GraphBit is relative position, uh, which how flex layout works. But you can also like position them absolute so that they have a fixed position. Let's add some text component inside it and see how it works. So I'm going to add two text components. I don't think you guys can see this, but yeah, each text component comes with a default text. It basically says double click to edit me. So for like input components or like text components or form components, you can like double click them and you can add some values. So for example, I'm going to add this to welcome screen, and I'm just going to click somewhere outside this area. It doesn't shows because the color is set to predefined value. So yeah, so for example, like text components have different you can see like it doesn't have how the flex items were available on the view component. It only has uh, the flex properties that are available on a text component. So I wanted to align it on center. So I'll click the center. There are different alignment properties. I want to change the font. So for example, there are different fonts available inside Darkbit that you can change. I'll set it to Montserrat Bold. I want to change the font size. I'll increase it by clicking. And now let's change the color to see it. And here it appears. Uh, you can also like use some text component available properties. For example, capitalize to transform the text or like uppercase. Uh, yeah, you can also like add individual margins and paddings to each component. So for example, these two text components, let me change the color first, are like aligned next to each other. Let's add some bottom padding of 20. So inside a mobile app, the initial or the primary axis is basically the vertical axis. This is how Flexbox works. Inside React Native, it's a little bit different than how it works on web. So the primary axis is considered this vertical axis, and the horizontal axis or x-axis is considered the secondary axis. So any component that you're trying to align would go as like a column pattern. We can definitely change that direction uh, to row, and what like each and every component would fit next to each other. We're not going to do that for this. It doesn't look good. Inside a view component, you can also set like all components to be aligned in the center. So click on the center and all the alignment property and select its value to center. All the components would be aligned by default to the center. You can also like edit your text component value from and enter it here. So just give it a random value, and I can increase its size. There are like predefined color values available for different purposes, but you can obviously define your own color values. Like go to the theme, you can add a new color. So for example, I want to add a orange color to this text. I'll call it orange. This new color defined by yourself would be here. You can edit any color property available. So for example, I want to change the color of error to bit purplish, pinkish. And this is how you can add your own custom colors inside your app. And then like you can, after adding those colors, you can pretty much select all the colors available from the color picker here, and it'll show here. uh, let's add some buttons and see how they interact. So like now I want to add some components here, and I'll select the image background. So image background is a container component, just like view. The only difference between these two components is that image background can have an image, but view is just like an empty container that allows you to question your components. So if I like want to add a button inside text, I can't, because text is an individual component. It will give you an error. But if I want to add a component beneath the uh, image background, it will allow me to add that. So I want to add two buttons.
Hey, Aman. I see that we had like a couple questions here in the chat. So do you mind if I kind of read them out to you?
Sure.
Yeah. So the first question came from Shresh, and he asked if you could also load custom fonts into DraftBit.
Currently, there's no way you can load custom fonts. We are working on adding those kind of functionalities. But yeah, currently there isn't one.
Yeah, and then I think the last question was whether or not I think you might get to this later, but then the question was just whether or not DraftBit allowed you to distribute the app that you create.
Yeah, you can distribute your app. Like I would like to know the specific distribution way. I, so like for example, you can share your app by while you're creating it, and if you go to the share menu, you click on this button, it will create a link of a PWA that you can share with anyone, and they can see your app working and both like how it would look inside your iOS device or an Android device. So it will just take a little bit of time to load. So like the current state of app is reflected here. Uh, and if you like want to publish your app, there are different like you can publish your build, and you can also enable publishing those binary files. So for example, if you want to publish on iOS or Android, you need to create your own binary files, but it also handles those kind of distribution levels. So you don't have to like go outside of GraphPit to publish your app. You can easily handle that from this interface. Uh, on that point, you can also like click on this code button, and you can view the code of each and every screen, each and every element. Code is written is generated just generated as how a React Native code would look like for a app. And if you click on this export app button, it will export the whole application. And you can like also copy the code, and it will copy the code that is in front of you, that is of the code of this particular screen. Yeah, let's get back to this screen. I'll add another view component because I want these both buttons to go inside a container. Yeah, I want them to have their own container. And you can like, so for example, each and every component that you add, it goes down at the, or like at the bottom of the layout tree, but you can easily like reposition them. So like you just click, hold, and drag it where you want to reposition. So for example, I want these two view components to be adjacent, and I'll just drop it. So this was our previous view component, and this is our new view component, and I want to like add these two buttons. So I'll just drag and drop them. So yeah, this button component has its own layout properties. It has its own configuration. You can set an icon. You can set its properties, different properties available. You can definitely set its name. So for example, I want to set it to log in, and this button I want to set it to sign up. I want to position this view component somewhere down below. So what I can do is that I can either define a flex value using the flex. Uh, no, I don't think I can define the flex value there. Uh, Basically, what I'll do is that I'll try to position it as an absolute so that it has a fixed position. And once you select absolute, you have to like define each and every direction. So like for example, I want it to be uh, positioned like 20 or 30 points below uh, the bottom. Well, maybe I'm doing it wrong, apparently. Uh, but yeah, like you can definitely create elements using this. Another way to position your elements is again like giving them some margin or padding. Like for example, if I give it a margin top of 40, it will be have a space of 40 points from here. You can also like give percentage values. These percentage values are calculated based on the width and the height of the screen. So for example, different like for example, iOS has like an iPhone mini and an iPhone normal iPhone. So both have like different uh, pixel densities and different screen sizes. Uh, so giving the percentage values can help you create more responsive layouts. Once you have like set up your screens, and you can like also provide some individual uh, margin and padding to each individual component. And yeah, that's it for this screen. Let's try to see what other advanced features that GraphQuick gives you. That how you would interact or put interactions by writing code. So I'll just create a new blank screen by going to this plus button. What I'm trying to do is that uh, so yeah. So for example, like this model opens, it gives you different screens that are already available that you can reuse. I'm going to reuse this login screen that is already created. You can also like add blank screen to your app, which like how we were introduced inside when we created this application inside the filter interface. You can also rename these screens. So for example, I'm renaming it to login. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to navigate from this this welcome screen by clicking the login button to this login screen. So like to add interactions, uh, so interactions are available only on buttons or touchable components, which is uh, like how they should perform or how you would actually write code inside your applications. Uh, so yeah, I select this button component. I go to the interactions tab. This interaction tab is available on the button component, and I can add an action. So for example, I want to add an action. There are different actions available, and I want to add an action called navigate. I'll click this action and I'll select its destination. Currently, we have three screens available: the current screen, the login screen, and the blank screen. I'll select the destination as the login screen. You can also pass data when you're navigating. So it's again a common pattern when you're creating mobile apps. You might want to pass an ID of an. So for example, inside a list, you have a list view and you have a detail view where you click an item in the list. The items detail view opens. So you can pass the data when you are interacting with your uh, API endpoints. So you can pass variables and you can select data when it is coming from your REST API endpoint. This is so yeah. Once you have added this interaction, let's see it in action. And to see it in action, I'm going to click on the web preview mode. This web preview mode basically generates a local uh, way of how your app would actually look like inside a mobile device. Uh, Once it generates, it adds a default header that you can like disable anytime. So we'll go to the navigation later, but let's see how navigation interaction works in real time. So now this application is presented you as how a PWA would be presented in real time. And once you click this login button, oh, oh, the interaction is not happening. Let me check my login.
Hey, Aman. I think there are a couple more questions here. Um,
Sure.
yeah, so I think there are two pretty great ones. Um, just the first one is if they were to make a login feature using DraftBit, would they have to um, create a database, or does DraftBit do that for them automatically?
Uh, so yeah, Rapid doesn't hit any data or it doesn't hold any data. So you have to bring your own endpoints. Like I can show you how bringing your own data kind of works. So for example, I'll go to this pre-created example that I had, which obviously looks better than what we were building in past 30 minutes. So yeah, the interactions, like we were on the point of interactions. This is how this doesn't have an interaction, but yeah, this is how you would create an interaction. And I think this is a sign up button. But yeah, this is how interaction works. Uh, Dartbit uses another open source library called React Navigation, which allows you to navigate inside your React Native applications. Uh, so yeah, this default header is presented by that open source library. But like if you want to check out what kind of navigators, what kind of screens inside which navigator you have, you can go to the navigation tab. You can add different navigators also, like add a stack navigator or add a tab navigator. The root navigator, which Dartbit already creates for you by default, is also a stack navigator. So each screen is stacked on top of each other. Um, you can easily like switch it off the header. So like each navigator or each screen navigator screen inside the navigator has this uh, properties panel, and you can like style them, or you can like select their configuration. So for example, I want to hide the header. I'll just enable this toggle and it will hide the uh, navigator. This is I wanted to talk about that would address that question of data. So this is a screen called list, and it has a bunch of list items. It has basically images and a text beneath it. All this data is coming from a REST API endpoint, which is like a mock API or a mock server. So Dartbit gives you this fetch component, which allows you to so let's go back to the initial step or how the API would you would integrate. So to integrate any API, you would click on this data tab. It will open a model. You can, if you have a custom REST API, you can click this button. You can click the service. You can add its base URL. I have already done that. For example, uh, this one. You can also select a REST API source. So for example, Dartbit offers these kind of sources. So they are like pre-configured. So each source has their own way of bringing data. But the configuration basically works in a similar way. Uh, when you're creating a new integrating a new API, you will add its name, you will add its base URL. If it has some other configuration, so for example, the default configuration for any API is bringing in the data in JSON format, and Rabbit does that add those headers to each HTTP request by default. But if they are some specific cases of, like for example, you are authenticating, bringing an authenticated endpoint, you would add a new header. You can click this button. You can set its name that HTTP request requires, and then you can give it a value or select a value if you have stored inside it. There are other points to configure an API. Once you have configured, you can click save. I have already created this, so the save button is disabled because I haven't made any changes to it. Once you create a REST API service, it will bring you to this screen, which is called where you can add individual endpoints. So an endpoint would require an HTTP method. So for example, uh, this endpoint, which brings 10 items from this base URL, has a HTTP method called get attached to it, and it just fetches the data. So for example, if you want to submit the data to an endpoint or submit a login sign up form, you can change your HTTP methods. You can also like provide parameters to your paths. So for example, I wanted to limit this endpoint to bring only 10 items from the data service. So I'm defining this 10 items here. You can also define or add custom headers for each specific endpoint. And then you can like test it out. And if it comes with a, so for example, this is a get request, it will come with a response of 200 and okay. And it will also allow you to preview the data that is coming from your API endpoint, and you can click save. Once you have integrated, this is the initial step of integrating an API and its endpoints. Once you have done that, what you'll do is you'll add a fetch component by selecting from the available components. So a fetch component basically allows you to bring the data inside the app. And then once you have added a fetch component, so for example, this screen has fetch component already selected. Yeah, you can select the service that you named, and you can select the individual endpoint that is available. Currently, it has only one endpoint. Also, for like testing purposes, you can pass query parameters from here. So when testing the endpoint, if you have noticed, I had like defined 10 items, but from here I'm passing only 8 items so that it only shows 8 items. And you can also like preview the data that is coming from it. Uh, To show a list of data, you'll need a list component. That comes with two kind of list components. One is scroll view, one is list. Scroll view is basically how is a basic level of list component. It's not recommended to use a scroll view component uh, because it cannot handle large amount of data. You'll have performance issues inside your app, and a list component is based on a flat list component that is available in React Native. Inside the list component, you would create your own, add your own components to represent the data. And once you have brought the data with fetch component, like you have integrated in with this particular screen, you select the list component, go to its data tab, you select the response that is coming from it. It's usually an array of objects. So you select it. And then on an sorry, on an individual component. So for example, this image component has the dynamic data that is coming from the API endpoint, and you change its source point uh, to data, and you can select the particular field that represents the image URL. So for example, once you have integrated all the data inside list, the API endpoint inside the list, you can see which fields of data are available, and each field has a value. So you just select the field name. I can show you like how this data is actually represented in the API. I've already opened a tab. So this is how this mock API is representing this array of each and every object. And these are like the particular field names. So for example, we this list has this image component, and this image component is getting its value from this image URL. Similarly, like the text component is getting its value from the text URL, uh, text title. Uh, Text components works a bit different than the image. So Rabbit gives you a field of text where you can like input text, where you can add as many levels of or as many fields. So for example, currently it has two fields which shows the title of the book, or item in the list, and the author. And once you have added like these variables, you can assign them the values from, again, like it shows you the list item, and you can assign these any value. So for example, if you want to, of course, that title would actually represent a title in a real app, but so for example, I wanted to change it to format. Here it will show me the format, and you can assign it any values. You can also like transform values uh, using predefined functions. So for example, you want to calculate the length of the, show the number of items inside the list, you will probably click on length and it will show the number of items inside that array. Uh, there's also like things like conditional display available, where you want to display a particular component only if something is true, or hide it if something is false. uh, there are a lot of elements available. So, for example, you can create your own custom screens, custom components. You can add open source libraries available in React Native ecosystem or Expo ecosystem. We have a bunch of examples in our community if you guys want to check out. For example, adding a camera, or like accessing the hardware camera or devices camera. And you can also add small functions that are custom to your app, and you want to like process some value that is coming from an API inside the app. Draftbit does that, gives you that ability. I hope this answers. This was long, but yeah, I hope this answers that question of data.
Okay.
This is
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, Tom. No, I was just
Yeah.
like saying that this is how Draftbit works. This is like just the elementary level of things that I've shown you guys today. But yeah, please, yeah, you're most welcome to try it out to its extreme level.
Yep. I just wanted to highlight a couple more questions here. I think there was one that asked whether or not you could connect your DraftBit application to other cloud services other than things like Firebase.
Uh, Currently, no. So you haven't seen Firebase inside this app because Firebase is a beta feature which is behind a feature flag. So it's not available to everyone. It's still a work in progress. Uh, but yeah, you cannot connect. Like if other cloud services are giving you REST API endpoints. So for example, you have a GraphQL service and you are also having those REST API endpoints for that GraphQL service. You can definitely connect, integrate it with GraphBit, but they
Okay.
have to be in a REST paradigm.
All right. And then just the last question, I think, is whether or not you can have multiple people work on one application at the same time.
Yeah, you can have multiple people working on one application at the same time, but yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I think um, the workshop is about to end. We have like 3 minutes left. Um, yeah, if any of the viewers here have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I would just like to thank Aman for speaking here again today. We'd love to have you next year.
Thank
And
you so much.
yeah, thank you so much. I'll send out the attendance and Q&A forms right now. Thank you so much for being here.
Uh, Thank you for having me. Thank you for this experience. It has been a pleasure talking to you guys and introducing you to Draftbit. Um, personally, like coming from a mobile developer background, since I've started using GraphBit and working for GraphBit, I have been amazed like how technology or like things have come so far ahead. There are different ways to use these kind of tools and these particular no-code tools. I'm not just specifying GraphBit. That might sound biased, but like any other no-code tool that might serve you your particular need or specific need. I just want to thank you all for joining me today, and I just wanted to leave you with these kind of two links. This is GraphBit.com is our website, and community.graphbit.com is where we hang out. We interact with our community members. You can post a question anytime, and if you're building an application, you want some support, you want some features that are not currently available in GraphBit, you can definitely request them here. And I'm also available on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Aman himself. If you want to guys connect or have questions later on about GraphBit, please feel free to ping me.
All right. Thank you so much. See you all.